There's a dialogue between CITB, government and industry about where those training needs need to be. It's about understanding the requirements of not just your business, but the sort of ecosystem in which your business operates. Let's see how that plays out. But I think in principle, that has to be a good thing, doesn't it?
It's very much driven by metrics. They've put some numbers on the board that they want to hit. We still need to promote the industry. We still need to get these people interested in it at a young age, and people that are already in sector wanting to upskill and wanting to build and develop those skills.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with Adobe Acrobat.
Right, Ryan, I've got a serious question to ask you, okay?
Ooh, go on.
Yeah. Bank holiday, half term, sunny weather, baking hot, paddling pool was out, slip and slide was out, grass has turned yellow. What do I do?
Well, I was going to ask you the same question because mine's black. It's honestly, it looks like proper scorched earth. It looks like someone's taken off and dropped a bomb on the garden. It's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. So I'm choosing to ignore it at the minute. That would be my recommendation to you is to do the same. Find something else to focus on.
Tell you what, why don't we focus on the construction industry within the UK and 3 major headlines from the latest week that's just been, potentially our own opinions, and then we'll give the audience one takeaway each at the end. How about that?
It'll never work. It'll never catch on.
Let's try it. We've got to try.
Well, we've got some good ones this week. We've sort of had some new sources that we haven't taken from before, some mainstream media stuff, some project stories. It feels a little while since we've done one of those in depth. So yeah, I'm excited for these.
Yeah. Particularly the last 2 we're going to cover. They're pretty specific in what they're saying. But let's rewind and we'll go with our first headline, which is from Specification Online. And this is all about CITB, Construction Industry Training Board, publishing its business plan for 26-27 and setting out how they're going to essentially spend and invest money within the industry for training and to make sure that we've got skills coming through.
Before we get into the specifics of the business plan, I think we should give some credit to CITB. They've had a tough year this year, and I suspect it's probably longer than that, but I've certainly noticed in the last 12 months a lot of criticism of the organisation around transparency, accountability. It's a tough market at the minute. We talk about skills every week, it feels like, and in the absence of a clearly identifiable organisation or person whose sole responsibility it is to sort all of this stuff, I think CITB has become a lightning rod for a lot of people's upset and feeling disgruntled with the state of all of that stuff. And they probably take a portion of that responsibility. But some of the media appearances I've seen the chief exec, Tim Balcon, have to front up to have been tough listens. They've been genuinely car crash, a couple of them. And not because of him, but because people have kind of been baying for blood a little bit. And I understand that frustration. Like I say, that people part with that levy money and they expect something back. So there's 2 things here. One is this, the transparency of coming out with an annual plan, because that exists within the context of a wider, I think it's a 7-8 year strategy that they've got. So they could quite easily publish that on a rolling basis and just go, we've told you what we're doing, leave us alone and let us do it, in much the same way that a government will lay out a 5-year plan for their term in Parliament and deliver against that. So the fact that they're giving these annual updates with, some accountability on what people should look out for over the next 12 months, I think is massive. But within the publication of the report and within the commentary around it, and I think Specification referenced this as well, they've been pretty transparent about sentiment towards CITB. I think it's only 1 in 3 survey respondents that actually said that they were happy with the way that the CITB was spending the levy and using their money at the minute. So they've not buried anything. They've not sought to sort of sweep anything under the rug. And then I love that this is all being addressed head on. And yeah, it's set against the way people are feeling now and issues that people are feeling in sector now. And a lot of the plans this year, they mirror conversations that we've been having. Is it about attraction into sector, or is it about stickiness of that interest when it's in sector? Is it about, is the money better spent on turning these from college students into full-time roles within sector, and how do we better do that? And I don't know if you want to dive in and talk through some of the specifics on the business plan, but it sounds like a lot of this is back to industry. The CITB is going to work with the sector to let the sector dictate how best to make those roles. So yeah.
Yeah, you bang on, and the thing that I really like about this is, there's a lot to like in investing into the sector and training, which is very much needed. But it's not head in the sand. They're addressing things that the actual sector has said, this is wrong. We're not happy with this, and as a body that is for the sector, you need to stand up and listen to that, which they have, and they've gone off people's recommendations, thoughts, opinions, feelings, and that's what they're going to keep doing. And the thing that I really liked was the very end of what Tim was saying. That the soundbite was that they're going to measure success essentially on various elements in terms of new entrants, supporting employees in training and upskilling their workforce, helping individuals develop skills. So it's not just we spent this money here, job well done, which is fantastic. Yeah, I did a little bit of digging in terms of the actual report with our friends at Adobe Acrobat, which we'll come on to in a little bit. But there's a total investment of 260.1 million, and the allocation is split in various guises. I won't go into mega detail, but over 50% is direct support to employers. And then you got things like investing in the industry, so standards, competence, insights. That's 66 million. And then there's other things. So there's admin, trading activities, and that's a smaller proportion of that spend. So you've got over 50% that's going direct to employers, which isn't a small amount. What they're looking to do, the headline target figures: 8% new entrants, 5% supported train and upskill for employers, and 9% individual support for the same thing. So it's really robust and specific, and it's open and transparent, which it should be.
Yeah.
So fair play, like you said, they've had a kick in. Hands up, we're listening to you now. This is what we need to do. We hear you, and this is a small proportion of a wider plan, which is good news. Final point on that, and it links very nicely to the government, which are offering 300,000 new work experience placements to key sectors, of which construction is one. So again, it's the government coming in to our industry, and what looks, at the face of it, it's not 300,000 in construction, but what looks to be a nice chunk of investment into workplace experience alongside CITB doing this, which is just really, really good dovetailing by both parties, really.
Dovetailing, that, yeah, it's a nice segue. Dovetailing was the exact phrase I was going to use. I think A, I noticed that, and I think it's great, and B, within the plan itself, it feels very similar. The conversation that we had a few weeks back, Pete, on the additional investment into further education centres of excellence. So we've had them in construction. I think there's around 18, 19 last year, and that now being repeated into other critical sectors within the industrial strategy that I would say construction adjacent, things like manufacturing. But that took a very local view of, what does the employer base need in this particular area? So we're not just aimlessly training young people because we've got quotas to hit. It's what does that local economy need based on, industry that's there, etc. This feels like it takes on a similar kind of a thing. There's a dialogue between CITB, government, and industry about where those training needs need to be. Because I have to be honest, from a personal point of view, I read employer-led training and felt a little bit like, is that buck passing? Is that kind of what, you guys, that you clearly don't like what we're doing, only a third of you are in favour of the way that we're spending the levy. You keep telling us you know better than us, and therefore over to you. But actually, it's much more nuanced than that, isn't it? It's about understanding the requirements of not just your business, but the sort of ecosystem in which your business operates. So, and again, back to your point on measurement, let's see how that plays out. But I think in principle, that has to be a good thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, massively so. And like I was saying, it's very much driven by metrics, by some. I'm not quite sure whether they're meaty, whether they're achievable, whether they're adventurous or whatever. But they put some numbers on the board that they want to hit, and that's commendable. As much support as can be given is needed, and the way they're going about it is correct, but it's still, people need to be involved. It's not a magic wand where they just rock up and here's all these people that want training. And we still need to promote the industry. We still need to get these people interested in it at a young age, and people that are already in sector wanting to upskill and wanting to build and develop those skills. And that's part of it. And that's down to not just CITB, but it's down to everybody in the industry to do that and encourage that upskilling.
Well, completely. And I was going to say, the final thing that I wanted to say on it, again, to commend CITB, because I think it's topical and it's important, is I noticed that there's quite a bit of weighting around competence, which again is something that we've spoken about recently. So not just about upskilling people, again, because we've got boxes to tick that people need to hold certain standards and certifications, but it's done with a view to legislation that is in place and other stuff that's coming down the track. So yeah, again, I think that's to be commended as well. It's not just a box ticking exercise, or it's not us chasing numbers. It's something that meaningfully will have impact within sector.
Yeah, great way to transition to our partners, Adobe Acrobat, and go back to what I was just saying before. The business plan from CITB, links in the show notes. What I did to get the best information out of it was I used Adobe Acrobat PDF Spaces. And what that allows you to do is upload a whole host of different files and formats, and then you can analyze those documents. And what it brought back was the information that I just shared with you and the audience. We deal with a whole host of sensitive information, and what PDF Spaces allows you to do is upload these documents, use AI Assistant to get the best information out of them and ask questions, but in a secured space where there's no outside interference like other AI platforms. So you are literally chatting to your documents, and it's fully referenced. So you can click on the reference and it shows you in the document where that stat came from, which is really, really powerful.
Yeah, well, I think I mentioned the panel discussion I was part of a couple of weeks back at UK Construction Week was about AI within marketing. And it's interesting, for all of the questions that could have been asked from the audience around promoting their business or whatever else the case would be, the very, very first question, Pete, was about document security and data security, and would people recommend a platform where that's most safe? So I think it's starting to creep into people's minds now. I think we do as an industry have a higher risk aversion and a higher sort of profile towards risk management perhaps than other sectors, given what we do. Where is my data going and how is it being used and so on. So the fact that this is a closed loop and that anything sensitive is within system, I think it'll be a massive relief to a lot of people. Well, closed loop is a nice segue actually onto our second story, isn't it? It's one that I have to thank my colleague Anthony Walker for flagging with me, but a really, really interesting one about an initiative in London called Tipping Point East, which in some respects, and again, it's mainstream media, so it's maybe less nuanced perhaps than some of the features that we cover in the trades. But it's probably interesting for that reason. I'm always fascinated. I love when construction and positive stories make the mainstream press. I think we deserve that pat on the back sometimes. But yeah, it's nice sometimes having a bit of lateral thinking applied to the sector and someone from outside, because some of the points that they highlight feel patently ridiculous, things that we kind of take for granted, but when you kind of hear it coming from someone else with a degree of innocence, it's like, oh yeah. So construction producing 62% of UK waste, and then we seem to have a lot of we have rising material costs, carbon pressures, resource constraints, and yet we're still as wasteful as we are. And there's the founder of Tipping Point East. There's some brilliant sound bites in there, but he talks about one project that was kind of the catalyst for all of this. He was asked to produce some wooden benches for sort of seating area for one of the London councils. And they were doing some tree felling literally next to where their site was. There was the exact wood that they needed for these benches. And procurement rules meant that he had to drive miles away to this forest to his supplier to pick these things up, rather than just being able to procure from literally next door to where he was. And the ridiculousness of that and everything else. Yeah, there's some brilliant stories in this one. But yeah, that's essentially what Tipping Point East are doing. It's a collective of several different organisations just looking at ways to procure waste material from their local environment that can be then reused to create something. And they've got some really, really cool projects where they've done this. It's a great story, and I hope it gets the the shine that it deserves to, because seeing other collectives like this spring up would be no bad thing. And yeah, I noticed on the ticker that's scrolling around on the video version of this on YouTube, Pete, you've gone with the headline that they used in the article. I don't know if you want to talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, so the article's from The Guardian, so we're going highbrow now. And we're going even higher brower for the final headline. But yeah, the actual headline for this piece is, it's like Dunkirk for the construction industry. And what he means by that, we're talking about Joel de Mowbray, who set this whole thing up, and he's the one that tells the story about the wooden benches on that street. And there's, like you say, there's wonderful sound bites, and there's two that I want to go through here. His first one is Dunkirk analogy about how this actually works for him, and he says, it's like all the small boats that helped rescue the military in the battle. We need to translate this waste into thousands of small-scale projects that can make use of the large-scale volumes of waste that we're collecting. We need thousands of small ships that take the waste away. Which is neat.
And I love it. And we talk a lot, don't we, about these false dichotomies and sort of diametric opposition, that if you are for this, then you're against this. He talks a lot about street logic. Again, you are felling this tree. I need the material from that tree for this project here, and therefore A should equal A. And procurement rules mean that that's not the case. Now, I'm not so naive. Again, we've spoken about this a lot. I'm very attuned to what's happening at the minute with things like CCPI, and what happened with Grenfell, with incorrect systems being used, and how poor paper trails often are within buildings, and therefore understanding what materials have been used in the systems, and testing is obviously absolutely vital. So yeah, I'm not for a second suggesting that, nanny state, get rid of all of that and we should just be taking things and, from the local economy and using them wherever. But there's got to be some common sense applied, surely, that for certain applications, certain types of products being used in particular ways that, yeah, I don't know, there's like a class, for instance, if you're making benches for your local community, shouldn't that be okay? Shouldn't it? I don't, like I say, I'm not suggesting for a second that, God forbid, we clad any of our buildings and things that we find within our local economy. But yeah, there's examples in there of, I'm just trying to find now, 12 tons of mahogany teak and afromosia that were going to the skip, that they were able to, with an old 1980s electric milk float that they turned into a logging vehicle. They were able to save that and then find a way to reuse. So yeah, I don't know. There feels like there's something in this. Again, that how scalable it is, I don't know. But yeah, we've spoken about rising costs. We've spoken about fuel insecurity. There's the environmental impact of that, just the sheer distance that some of our materials have to travel. If there's a way to even make a dent into that, then I think that's got to be worth looking at, hasn't it?
Yeah, my dad was actually a joiner for around about 52 years. So the fact that there was 12 tons of this beautiful wood that was just going to probably be burnt, and or where it end up in landfill or wherever it is, and it hasn't been used is
Pete,
criminal.
On that, I'm sorry to interrupt me, but yeah, maybe to my shame, maybe everyone else knows this, and I'm slightly naive for not, but just how leafy and green, and how fortunate we are to sort of live in the UK. With the world's third largest importer of timber, that seems criminal, given A, the environmental impact, and B, the cost of that in the context of everything else that's happening at the minute. It's just, yeah, sorry, I'm on my high horse now, but that really sort of took me back, given the size of this nation relative to others, and then we're third. I can't get my head around it.
And I think that goes back to what he was saying and what you highlighted in terms of the street logic. And then there's institutional logic, which is dictated by insurance, safety standards, company liability, and it's important, but it's rigid.
Yeah.
And what they do, and what Joel's highlighting is that, like you said, they're not just taking things and, we'll have this mahogany, we'll have these windows, we'll take these doors and we'll repurpose them. There's an actual use case that he highlights, the fact that I think it was from the old Smithfield meat market where they got the mahogany. They actually there was a number of numerous fire doors, and they were perfectly intact. They were absolutely pristine and could be used again, but they didn't use them. They
Yeah.
did not take them because they haven't got, or they're not reselling them. They might have taken them. They're not reselling them simply because they haven't got the knowledge and the certification and the training, which they're going to eventually. He says the training to know and understand what makes a perfectly good fire door. So, like you were saying about CCPI and taking old and making it new again, it's not like they're just a scrap merchant that, you want a door, we've got a door. They're
Yeah.
deadly serious about how this is done, and they take it as rightly so, serious, particularly when it comes to health and safety and insurance and standards and things. Absolutely 100%.
Yeah, and that's why I say I'm not so naive to think that this is, this has blanket all kinds of projects and all kinds of scale applications. But yeah, there's just something in me that says there is a level or an application type or something where this could be more commonplace and probably should be more commonplace. We're not just with the amount of forests and sort of green space that we've got. We're blessed in this country to have a lot of historic projects where there's lots of, whether it's teak, mahogany, but beautiful material that could be reused. And we talk a lot about circular economy. Yeah, here's a way to really do that in practice and make it meaningful at a community level. So yeah, I'd advise anyone have a nosy through. I think what they're doing is to be applauded.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's I think there's space for more of this.
There's a lot right down, even down to when the reporter, let's let's reference Alice correctly, shall we? Alice Fisher, who wrote the story, when she visited, she said there was two sawmillers from the organization National Sawmill, who were showing a group of Central St. Martin students around. And they were genuinely, the two millers were genuinely called Tom and Jerry.
I wondered if you were going to give the names.
I just love that, because you think this is a story which can't give any more. And then you just hear that, and we're having a laugh and a chuckle, but it was just bringing that lightheartedness into a story that's already great. It just gave it context and flavor. And yeah, Tom and Jerry, good on you.
Yeah, I love this. I really, really love this. There's such an obvious logic to it. Going back to street logic being used within this. Yeah, more of this kind of stuff. I'm certain there's other collectives doing similar things in other cities. But yeah, I do think there is a real space for this kind of thing.
Completely. Are we going to move on to our final headline from the BBC?
From the Beeb, yeah, we've with respect to all of our friends in the trades, we've gone up in the world a little bit this week, haven't we? It's another project story, which again I think we've probably underdone in recent weeks, but no, forgiven slightly for how crazy the world has been and just how many sort of changes to the economy and reports and stuff have come out in recent weeks. But yeah, we've been overdue a big project story like this. One that really caught my eye, I remember seeing a report a little while back about hospitals and convalescence as a means of recovery, that we're very medical focused on, you are in hospital, you are treated this way, and then off you go. And yeah, we used to, decades back, there would be these kind of hospitals that were just about rest, basically, and the restorative benefits of doing that, and we don't do as much anymore. And that's what piqued my interest on this. So this is, for anyone that hasn't seen it, obviously links in show notes. King's College Hospital in South London. It's one of the, if not the busiest, it's one of the busiest intensive care units in the UK. And they've built a roof garden that basically for intensive care patients as part of their recovery, where they would all be bedbound and sort of confined to ward and so on. Not that great for people's mental health, not that great for people's sort of desire to recover and motivation and so on. So they built this beautiful roof garden space where there's waterproof access to oxygen and to power for any units they may be, probably any machines that they may be using as part of their recovery. And yeah, just the great place to get some fresh air, to recuperate, recharge mental health. It sounds like it's been designed in a very sensory way, if that's the correct terminology. So the selection of plants that have been used and so on. There's things that are visually interesting from they've thought about where patients' eye lines are likely to be if they are bedbound, as they will be in many instances. So just incredibly well considered from an architecture and from a design point of view, but all with a view to patient health, and ultimately then thinking about the commercial aspects of that, which I know it's not front and center within the story, but there's a consideration, I guess, from the hospital's point of view and for other NHS trusts, that if this helps people recover faster and recover better, so that they aren't readmitted again at a later date, etc., then what's the commercial case for? Because I think there's a 2 million investment, if I'm right, within the story, that the hospital's charity funded this. It's not the point. Obviously, the point is healthcare and it's care for the individual, but there has to be an economic way up of payback, effectively. What is the impact to the service on that 2 million? And on the basis of the anecdotes within there, I would suggest that payback will be pretty soon.
Mm.
And to make me sound less of a heartless monster, there's a beautiful video in there of a young girl who it's a quadruple bypass or a very heavy operation on her heart. And there's a video of her being sort of shown this roof for the first time and getting really, really emotional about being away from the ward and being outside and able to breathe and so on. That's fundamentally, that's the point of it, isn't it? But yeah, ticks across the board for me. I think it's a brilliant, brilliant story. What do you think of this one, Pete?
Can't argue with that, can I? So that's Holly Allen you're talking about. And she's been in intensive care inside probably the same room, if not the operating theatre and the intensive care unit for 2 months. And it's hard to understand how difficult that must be. Like, let alone, just ignore the fact that she's had problems with her heart and she needs heart operations and things like that. That's just like, just commendable, just people that go through that and go on to live normal lives. But the mental and physical and emotional strain that just staying in the same room for 2 months must have on you. I mean, she's even quoted halfway through this is saying, when you're stuck inside all day, there's no motivation to try and get back to normal life. You get tired of fighting. And like, who wouldn't get tired of fighting? And you're fighting for your life, but it's got to be draining. And we all know that we need to spend more time outside, get a bit of vitamin D and be in nature, because it has huge health benefits. So anything we can do to get people outside that really struggle to get outside, we should be doing it. And this is quite relatively small rooftop garden, but it has all the equipment they need. It's easily accessible. It doubles up for, we've got to remember, the doctors and the nurses that work in intensive care as well. They need respite. They're in it, and they've got this emotional attachment to these poor people that are going through major things that are going to impact their lives. And they need a bit of respite as well, so it doubles up for that. And it's really well considered. It looks stunning, and you just think of London and all the rooftops that are there. Yeah, they're not all hospitals. I get that, but you think of all the rooftops and what we could utilize them for. Not just that, but the environmental impact and on drainage systems and how we store water and use water and how we disperse water. That's
completely.
just an additional factor.
Completely. Sorry to interject there, but yeah, environmental impact is exactly what I wanted to mention as well. Again, you're absolutely right in terms of green roofs that very de rigueur a little while back in terms of their impact. But there's a tie in here a little bit, and maybe this is me doing my takeaway prematurely somewhat. But we've been critical, or at least I've been critical, of previous governments and alleged hospital building programs where it actually amounted to some renovation work to existing hospitals in a lot of cases. But in this case, I'm going to flip that and say that it's a positive, that here's an existing building that had what was dead space on the roof that wasn't doing anything. And they've been able to flip that. So there's it's not new build and all the embedded carbon and everything else that comes with that. It's taking an existing space and with some ingenuity, some clever thoughts, some brilliant people. I mean, it's BMJ architects, Nigel Dunnett and Sarah Price acting as the landscape architects on this that have some renown within that world. And did a lot of the London 2012 stuff. If you've been around the stadium there, but it's a beautiful planting that they've done. But yeah, just by being more patient oriented, and I guess audience oriented in that it's patients and healthcare staff, as you say. The hospital grounds have always had kind of patient gardens for people to recuperate in, but never intensive care patients. It's kind of people that are mobile or are able to sort of be wheeled to whatever. So understanding that those things are important, but yeah, it's just very, very clever to take an existing space and to think in a slightly different way, apply a little bit of lateral thinking. And yeah, like I said, I know that the purpose of this ultimately is patient welfare, but I would be convinced that this would have a solid economic case for it and could be done by other hospitals. If you think how many other towers there must be, I'm thinking of NHS hospitals near to me that would probably have that kind of space at roof level that could do something similar. As with the previous story, I'm hoping that there's some good data collected in the medium term that shows some viability and that others can follow suit. How can we make best use of the space that we already have for less than it would cost us to build, from scratch and build something new. So there is kind of there's a reuse element to this as well, which I love.
Yeah, I think aside from that, it resonates with us in terms of it's not just looking at that one linear approach to we get somebody in, we fix them, they recuperate, and away they go. It's okay. So how can we do that in other ways?
Yeah,
and it's not that prevention is better than cure, but this is almost a bit of a preventative method in terms of the longevity that you're spending in hospital. It's not just let's give them more drugs and more things that'll speed along recovery. Let's use nature, because it's proven to help and recover. Yes, so there's nothing not to like about this, and hopefully we can report on this in 12, 18 months time and show that a lot of patients are fully recovered and a lot sooner than normal because of this.
Yeah, completely. Nice. The garden's beautiful as well. Again,
Yeah.
Go and have a look at the article. Anyone that can. There's plenty of great photos and video in there. But there's nothing not to like in this project. And as you say, I'd be fascinated to look back in a few months' time and see how it's affected people and see what the upshot is. Because I'm convinced that, as with the second story, that there's a case here for this to be rolled out at a larger scale across the UK.
Yeah, there's certainly no black or yellowed grass in on that rooftop garden. Far from it. And on that horticultural bombshell, let's move on to takeaways and over to you, Ryan, because you.
Yeah, I've pretty much done mine, to be honest, people. I think that there's a nice synergy with certainly with the second two stories about understanding what you've got and making best use of it. We don't always need new. Sometimes it's about looking at the resources that are available to us and managing those a little bit better or managing those differently for maximum impact. There's something that can be applied to people. Maybe it does tie into the first item as well in terms of training and upskilling and so on. If we think of resource more generally, maybe there's at least one thing that each of us could take a look at within our professional lives and make better use of by applying it in a slightly different way.
Yeah, mine's on a similar ilk to quote Joel. Street logic, use it. That isn't to say be flippant. That isn't to say it's streetwise and smart and dodging the T's and C's and things like that. No, it's not about that. It's about understanding your environment, looking at things slightly differently and thinking, why this might be protocol and this is what we do, but as long as we stick within that parameter, why can't we just do this instead? Because it's the same outcome with the same materials or for the same project or whatever it might be. Yeah, it's a better way of doing it. So use your street logic, as long as you're within the parameters of what is safe and secure.
Yeah, I love it. Start with why. Do a bit more questioning. It's how things get done ultimately, isn't it?
It is indeed, and that's how this podcast gets done. We always ask why.
And on that note, I'll see you next week.
See you later.